What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed. And today we're talking about three different things. We are talking about the Marvel special Werewolf by Night. We are talking about She-Hulk episode 7. And we are talking about Andor episode 5. So here is my co-host with the most, Brian. How you doing today?
Doing good, Pete. Excited to talk about these many things. Although, man, sometimes we cram a little bit too much in, I think.
I agree. Did you just get my notes? I just sent 50 pages of notes to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm like, you reference something like, I don't remember that at all.
You don't remember something happening in the episode, or?
Yes, you referenced a quote of something that someone says, and then you say we should talk about this. I'm like, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, this week, they just decided to dump as much content on us as possible from many
something every day. We had Andor Wednesday, Shield Thursday, and Werewolf by Night on Friday. I mean, once a day.
Right, and that's just Disney Plus. And then if you're into horror stuff, like the stuff I cover on my other channel, Lastercast, there's a shit ton of stuff. I mean, maybe it's because of New York Comic Con. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like New York Comic Con doesn't get the recognition or the hype that San Diego Comic Con gets.
It does not. You do usually get some reveals of some caliber, but they're generally not as big as the San Diego ones. Like the San Diego Comic Con is more like a big pop culture thing. New York Comic Con still has a little bit more comic-y focus, although they wish they could be as big as SDCC.
Yes, yes.
It is fun to go to, but I haven't been in a couple of years at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't been since I moved to Texas, and the Texas Comic Cons are pretty lame, I gotta say, compared to these. It's you get the guy that played Greedo or something in the original Star Wars. It's one of the big guests. Cool.
That's like a real Comic-Con kind of thing, you get those smaller extras and stuff like that appearing, and it certainly is bigger. I mean, it is. I think part of the thing that turned me off of it too is that it used to be really hard and complicated to get tickets.
Mm.
And then they coupled that with them getting more expensive every year. And but I think this year, I could have actually just bought one and went. Which is I don't think I could say you could do in outside maybe like the first year they did it.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, now Danny is there from the Lastercast, and I feel like I'm the person in the chair. You remember what's his face says that?
Guy in the chair.
Yeah, I'm the guy in the chair. I'm the oh, whoa, there he is. All right, that was so sexy, man. You were like Usher or something. You made a little noise and everything. But I was gonna say I feel like Felicity Smoke because I'm sitting there sending messages okay, go to this table, go see this person, and it's fun. I mean, I'm kind of living vicariously through him, but. Regardless of our attendance of a Comic-Con, we still got to get a lot of content. And so for today, Brian and I, we usually do the MCU Disney Plus show first. In this case, there's 2 of them. So I thought we should do Werewolf by Night first. Is that cool?
Sure, yep.
Sweet. Okay, so did you know anything about the director of this before you went into the show?
Yes, I did recognize the name. I did know he was a composer. I didn't realize that he directed it until the very end of the movie when I saw his name pop up. So that was interesting choice, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he makes some iconic scores because he did the music for Up and he did the music for Lost. And Lost, I thought, always had very memorable music. You mentioned the end credits, and I was going to say, weren't you kind of surprised there was nothing in the credits at all? No post-credit or mid-credit scene?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how weird of a thing this is. It's essentially a one-off episode of a show. I don't feel this was necessarily a movie quality. You could argue made-for-TV movie, I suppose. It felt like a very stylistic one-off, which is really weird. 55-minute runtime. I mean, they've had episodes of shows run longer than that. And I actually really did like it a lot, but it's still just the random placement of it, and why and all that. We're always asking, how does this connect? What does this have to do? What does this mean for the future?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess that you could tie it to Moon Knight. I guess you could tie it to Blade, although I'm hearing there's problems going on with Blade big time. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you could loosely say that this was meant to somehow tie into the upcoming Midnight Suns video game or something like that. I no idea. But it's very curious as to why this came out, other than just like, hey, what can we do for Halloween? Sort of.
You know, it's funny because I don't know. This probably exists, but there probably is a behind-the-scenes podcast for Marvel, because I know, like with HBO, for every one of those shows that are big shows, they have like little podcasts that tie in, right? Like the Game of Thrones or whatever. And then they have like Talking Dead on The Walking Dead, like on AMC, right? So there has to be some kind of Marvel thing. I know that Disney Plus puts out these like little specials about the making of something, but that's always sort of after the fact. And it's an interesting point that you bring up, because it's like, why did they make this? If you look at the comics, there's a lot of stuff that you could kind of tie this into moving forward with Phase 4 and Phase 5 of the MCU. But as far as like why they made it, I think that essentially they're just trying to branch out. And I do think that if I had to guess, maybe it's just because they're trying to do something different. And they're like, hey, we need to try something that's different from our regular mold. We've made so much of this content at this point. We got to do something different. So let's shake it up. That's my idea. I don't know. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, and you're right. There are a lot of ways that the character of Werewolf by Night, Jack Russell, can kind of intersect with the rest of the Marvel universe.
Right.
His backstory is, deals with the Darkhold, vampires, other creatures of the night, and then also we have Man-Thing, of course, who has his own little place in the Marvel universe, I suppose. And although I don't know how he got to this point. I mean, you mentioned in your notes that he's the nexus of all realities. I mean, that seems like something that could be very pertinent with, the idea of Secret Wars coming and all kinds of realities. So, but do you know any more about that?
Okay, so I don't know why Man-Thing is the guardian of the Nexus. I know that, like, he was a scientist in Nebraska, and essentially his origin is the same origin as Swamp Thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, right. That's the weird part. I always thought that Man-Thing was a copy of Swamp Thing, but it's the reverse. Yeah. But I don't know why he's like the guardian of the Nexus. I think that maybe it might just be a matter of he coincidentally ended up in the swamp where this Nexus is, because the Nexus of all realities is like in a swamp, I think in Florida of all places.
Wow.
In the Marvel universe, right? So I think it might just be coincidence that that's where he is. I don't think it's like he was destined, but I do think that Man-Thing did come first and then Swamp Thing. And I know that like they both had similar origins, but then, in the 80s, you had the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run where he like made Swamp Thing so much more and like gave it so much more depth. And I think that Marvel's response to that was essentially making him the guardian of this Nexus. And just for people that are like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? That creature that's in this Werewolf by Night, which, spoilers, by the way, Man-Thing is in it, right? He essentially like protects this area that gives you access to like all the different areas in the multiverse, right? All the different realities. And so like they might touch upon that. I think that you bring up a really brilliant point that like they're doing all this multiverse shit already in the MCU, so it would make sense to have him in there. Do you think that based on his appearance in this and how he acted, do you think that people would be excited to see him in a movie?
I mean, I believe that most people, this character would not be on their radar. I mean, either of these characters. I don't think so, but I think it's not a bad little Easter egg for nerds like us,
Right.
Actually, here's a question. What was your first exposure to Man-Thing? If you recall.
Well, I was at the gym and this guy opened up his towel and I was like, look at that Man-Thing right there. No, honestly, Man-Thing, I don't think I've ever really read anything where he was the main character. I know that like he like will pop up in things sometimes. He has been in the most recent Jason Aaron run of Avengers, and Blade, who's on that team, has like a little baby man thing that he kind of has on his shoulder. But he doesn't talk, you know, and so he's just like this character that's in the background a lot. And I don't find him very compelling. I like Swamp Thing a lot, but what about you?
So the reason I asked is because I have this very specific memory. There was a comic series called What the.
Oh, okay. Right.
It was like this little like one page kind of thing where it was like a dating game show, and there were like 3 characters. I couldn't even tell you who the other characters were, but Man Thing was one of the contestants that the Bachelorette was choosing from. And I believe he won, but I just remember him having these like little cartoony heart eyes and all this stuff, and he won by not saying anything basically. And I don't know, that was my introduction to Man Thing though.
Yeah, it's funny because like design wise, he can look very scary. But like in this show that we just watched, he can look a little goofy, right? I thought he kind of looked like a funny little tentacle monster, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so like that kind of goes along with what you're saying with that comic. Like he can kind of be used for comedic purposes, just like how there's a baby man thing in that Avengers run.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go like the whole line, like, oh, he's called Ted.
Right. And that's the whole thing. I was like, wait a minute, he's called Ted. I had to look it up, and essentially, like he has the same origin as Swamp Thing, where in his case, he was working on a project with some scientists, and they were trying to recreate Captain America's serum. And AIM terrorists, like that organization AIM, attack them, and he injects himself with that serum. And I guess he mixes in with like the plant life or the swamp life, and he becomes Man Thing.
Man,
and
how many heroes have had their origin based on someone trying to recreate the super soldier serum?
I honestly love that though. I think that's fantastic.
No, I'm not saying it's funny. It's funny. It's like it does. It's something that seems so vague. It's a serum that makes you stronger and better or something like that. And like this one guy figured it out, but no one else can figure it out.
Yes,
but you're right though. It is entertaining and interesting to see how many people have tried and failed. But it's also funny to me that it's so vague. You know.
Right. Well, I think that in a comic or maybe even in one of the movies, they kind of gave off the idea that like it sort of enhances or it like brings to the surface what you are, like who you are. That's why Steve Rogers is Paragon. And I think that's maybe the reason why it only kind of works is because Steve Rogers is the exception, not necessarily the serum. And
maybe maybe people are trying to recreate the effects that Steve received rather than what it actually did.
Right. And when you look at the Ultimate comic book universe, which is gone now, but like so many different things were tied into looking into that serum and recreating that serum. Like the Hulk was based on that in that version.
Did they ever? I wonder if they ever did anything where like Erskine was like an alien or something like that, or something.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. But I mean, I can't pinpoint a story, but yeah, probably. But like that's the thing, right? Like all this shit connects in the comics. All this stuff is tied together. Like I wrote this in the notes too, but like the actual character of Werewolf by Night, you know, Jack Russell, who's the main guy, they call him Jack in this movie or show or whatever. His bloodline is so convoluted and connected to the other Marvel shit. Like his ancestors fought against Dracula, and Dracula is a big character in the Marvel comics, just for people that don't know. And then at one point, his family, his ancestors owned this estate, and they sold their estate to these 2 scientists, and one of those scientists became the High Evolutionary, who's like a Marvel villain. And that estate was on Wundagore Mountain. Now, just to kind of go back to what you were talking about before, how does this connect to like MCU stuff? Well, we already have seen Wundagore, right? Like in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And then also the High Evolutionary is in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, right?
Yes, but I'm going to imagine that's going to be a reimagining of that. He's not going to be from Earth. He's going to be from space.
Right.
Something like that. But
I second that, yeah.
Yeah, and do you think, speaking of the family history, do you think the line about, I think one of the other hunters asked him if he asked Jack if he's fought any of them before, and they look at the vampire-looking guy, like, oh, I tangled with him a couple times.
Right. Are you saying, do I think that's Dracula?
Well, no. Do you think that's what that's alluding to?
Yes, I do think it's like a vampire type thing. Like maybe that's not like Dracula, but maybe it's like one of Dracula's main guys. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, right, is that the Marvel monster stuff is a lot of fun. And a lot of it is from like the 1970s. Like there was this Dracula comic in the 1970s, and Werewolf by Night is from the 1970s. And C. Robert Cargill, one of my favorite writers, posted this thing on Twitter where he was saying that like the Werewolf by Night special is essentially like a 1970s Marvel horror comic, but through the lens of a 1930s horror movie. And I thought that was a really good way of explaining what this was.
Yeah.
So like stylistically, did you enjoy it? I think you kind of already said that you liked this special. Did you like this sort of special shots? Yeah.
Yes. I think my absolute favorite shot was after he transforms into the werewolf, which I curiously think they avoided saying the word werewolf. And there was a shot of a door slowly closing, and he was kind of rampaging on the soldiers, and some blood actually splatters on the lens.
Oh, yes.
That was a really great shot. But I think to your point in your notes, where you said that this was enjoyable, but it was the style of it that elevated its existence, really. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I agree with that with the Doctor Strange 2 as well. But I still really enjoyed this. And I mean, I know we didn't talk about ranking this. I guess we rank this with shows, not movies.
Oh,
I'm really torn where to put it because I kind of want to put it high, honestly.
Okay. I think that since it's released on Disney Plus, we should do it with the shows.
Yeah.
So let's do that when She-Hulk ends. Let's make sure that we rank this in there too.
Sure. Yeah.
But stylistically, like that is what I said in the notes was that had this been done in sort of a generic kind of Marvel way, where it's just like any one of these other shows, I think it would have been a lot less appealing. And it's funny because it's actually written by two people that have a lot of experience with Marvel shows. Heather Quinn was one of the writers. She was a writer on Hawkeye, and Peter Cameron, who worked on WandaVision and Moon Knight. And Moon Knight, of course, that's where Moon Knight came from, the comic Werewolf by Night. But I just one little side point I wanted to point out too was that this Peter Cameron, he's working on developing Mark Millar's Magic Order comic and putting that on Netflix. Do you have any idea when that comes out?
I don't. And I know I read the first volume of that because I think it was just a couple of miniseries. I don't think it was an ongoing.
Right.
And it's certainly interesting, but there are some controversial choices, I think, in that.
Oh, well, Mark Millar, right? It's like,
yeah. And I think, I mean, it sounds like we're wrapping up here on Werewolf by Night here, but we can't not mention Elsa Bloodstone, who is another, and the Bloodstone family, very, I wouldn't say super prominent Marvel character, but she's been in things. You mentioned Next Wave, and she's been in some more of the occult books. And she was in a couple issues of Deadpool recently, within the last couple of years too. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing about the Marvel horror stuff, right? Is that it never really truly becomes like a top-selling main book. I think like maybe the most popular or famous one is maybe Ghost Rider, right? Because he's connected to all the Midnight Suns and all that kind of shit. And he was really big in the 90s. But even he now is sort of like a backup character to other people. But like as far as like the horror books go, they're never really like the prominent best-selling books, but they love to stick them into other things like X-Men. I mean, X-Men fought like Dracula a couple of times, even recently too. And like you'll see these characters like Deadpool. There's a whole thing where Deadpool got married, and he got married to this woman that was like this monster queen, and she was in many, many trades worth of Deadpool comics. She ended up getting with Dracula, and so there was a ton of monster stuff in the Deadpool comics. And I think it's just because comic book writers that are like a little bit older than us grew up maybe in the late 70s, early 80s, and they just really liked this Marvel horror stuff, and so they just shove it into their books as much as they can,
Yeah, the main reason I ended up buying this Deadpool book that I was reading for a little while was because it took place in Staten Island.
Oh no, that's a fucking horror in itself.
Well, it was funny because Staten Island gets taken over by monsters, and Deadpool somehow becomes the king of the monsters, and that's why also Bloodstone's there. So, I mean, I had to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That sounds like some real scary shit, man. But yeah, that you mentioned Next Wave, Agents of Hate, and that's this really great comic. And once again, there's like a little tie in there. I doubt they'll ever do any kind of Next Wave thing in the MCU, but like Monica Rambeau is on that team, you know,
Yep.
and Robot Man is on that team. I'm assuming that Robot Man is going to get put into one of these shows or movies eventually too.
Yes, not to be confused with the Robot Man and Doom Patrol that we talk about often.
Good point. Thank you for saying that too.
Wait,
And
isn't it Machine Man?
Holy fuck! Wow.
Yeah, it's Machine Man in Marvel. Yeah.
Thank God you were on this show. Thank you. And then just one other character, which this is a real reach, but like Boom Boom or Boomer from X-Force was on that team too.
Sorry, that's jogging my memory. I bought a comic recently. It's very horror centric actually. It's they call it Exterminators.
Oh yeah. Jubilee's on that team, right?
Yeah. It's Dazzler, Jubilee, Boom Boom, and Laura Wolverine.
Oh,
they're fighting vampires, and it's actually pretty good. I like it.
Shit, did you buy that on Comixology or?
I believe I did. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. Okay, I like that.
I think it actually has some like mature rating on it too. So.
Oh fuck! I gotta check this out. Okay, yeah, I love a lot of those characters. Laura Wolverine, that version of Wolverine is like one of my favorite Marvel characters. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not Tom. Is it Tom King?
Tom Taylor.
Tom Taylor.
Tom Taylor did a run of her. Yeah. Agree with like Badger. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there was one thing I want to talk about though. So stylistically, you mentioned this a while ago that like the style was like really good and it really helped. And you mentioned that one scene where the door was closing. There were a couple of different shots I liked a lot. One was, I think probably my favorite shot was when Elsa Bloodstone was in the cage and he was changing, and it would like kind of slowly zoom in on her, and the light would flicker too.
And you see the shadow of him transforming. Yeah, that's. Oh my god. Yeah, you're right. That was a good one too.
That was good. I mean, there's multiple things. I mean, some of it was sort of generic kind of MCU stuff, but then that was really great. One thing I have to mention, because I'd be mad if I didn't, but when Jack is being led into the maze, there's this sort of brown, it's almost like Inception style brown noise, but there's a fucking guy walking next to him with a tuba, and he's going brown, you know, and there's a fucking flame coming out of the tuba too. I was like, that is perfect. But, you know, I think one thing we should also mention, it's not in my notes, but people were talking about how this was like a horror movie and how this had more violence than your typical Marvel movie. The thing is, I don't think that it's like this drastic jump up in violence and gore. I think it's just like maybe one step above your usual Marvel show.
Yeah, I would show this to my son. I think he actually would enjoy this. I'm not scared of him being scared of it. But yeah, it's a little bumped up. Because, like I said, there was the one scene where you saw blood in the camera. There's a scene where Elsa is fighting one of the other hunters, and you actually like she cuts his arm off, and you actually see blood fly out of his arm as he's like flopping around afterwards.
That's right. And then, not to mention, she shoots him with his own crossbow in his jaw.
Yeah.
And then holds her hand over his mouth to essentially suffocate him and stop him from crawling out. And then he has the arrow like sticking out of his face. That was pretty gruesome, I guess. That's probably the most gruesome thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. And then, you know, Man Thing burning people and stuff. But yeah, like it's just I liked all the little like old school Universal horror little nods here and there. Even the setting, like this weird garden in some manner, it felt very old school horror, and it's just the style really upped this for me. And if there was more of it, I would probably watch it.
Absolutely, yeah. I wanted to mention two last things too. Jack Russell is played by Gael Garcia Bernal, and I am pretty sure, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he plays the Crow in the second Crow movie, City of Angels. And then he was also he was one of the vampires in Queen of the Damned. And then I know that he was in that movie Old that came out.
Oh yeah, I just watched that a couple months ago.
Right. And it's honestly no insult to him, but I kind of thought that like his acting was a little off in that, and I thought that movie was that might be Shyamalan's fault though. But I thought he was very good in this. I liked his connection with Man Thing, and I just liked his attitude overall. I think he was great. I would like to see more of him. Who I would really like to see more of is Elsa Bloodstone, and she was played by Laura Donnelly, and she looked very familiar. She was in this show called The Nevers, which I think had potential but like nothing happened because it was connected to Joss Whedon, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That was going on right as he got canceled for like the third time or whatever.
Right. And one thing I want to point out about the Nevers, because I think this might be my only opportunity to say this, but like the Nevers was sort of this Victorian era superhero show, and it was like female characters were the ones that had powers. And I think that probably the reason why this show even existed was because I'm pretty sure Joss Whedon at one point wrote the what do you call it? The Runaways. And I think that during his run, he did a run where they were like back in time in like that time period. It's either that he literally wrote that himself or like Brian K. Vaughan did that with the Runaways. But I'm pretty sure Joss Whedon did it. And so like the Nevers.
Runaways.
What's that?
I don't remember him writing the Runaways, but
okay, so maybe it is Brian K. Vaughan still. But like there's this era of the Runaways where they're in that time period and they have kind of steampunky kind of pure powers and stuff in that time period. So that actress, though, I mean, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but that actress, Laura Donnelly, who played Elsa Bloodstone, I thought she was very good. And I really enjoyed the way that she fought. Like she did some of that kind of Black Widow shit where like she jumps up and then wraps her leg around a guy's head and like brings him down.
Yeah, using the weight and gravity against them.
Right, but I felt like the way that she moved, I liked that so much better than both versions of Black Widow fighting. And she did this one move, which was like she was almost like a cat. She like slinked under this like one like stone like rail, and she just kind of slinked under it real smoothly. Like I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to see more of that.
Yep. Sure.
So I think we're good as far as Werewolf by Night, unless you had anything else you wanted to say about it.
No, I think that's it for me. But I will say that the guy who played Jack was not in The Crow. He wasn't old, but not The Crow. I just looked it up.
Okay. So I'm kind of racist, I guess, but I was like, oh, they look the same. But okay, but yeah. So, but he wasn't that old, so good. What I was gonna say was one last thing too. I forgot. It was the Bloodstone itself. I like how they made that red and glow, and it was kind of like it was almost weird reference, but like Schindler's List, where you had the girl with the red coat.
Yeah.
Oh,
nice touch. Yeah, and then obviously once she gets the gem at the end, the whole thing turns to color.
Right, and then they play Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which is just like the Wizard of Oz, where it changes from black and white to color too.
But reverse.
Right. Yeah. All right. So cool. So let's move on to She-Hulk episode 7. In episode 7, She-Hulk is representing Eugene Patillo, who is Leapfrog, and he's suing Luke Jacobson. That's a returning character from a previous episode. Now, he's suing Luke because the rocket boosters on his suit malfunctioned, and now Luke is in court, and he is represented by Mr. Matt Murdock.
Yes. This is the episode everybody's been kind of waiting for.
Yes.
I saw a funny exchange on Twitter where some guy tweeted at Kevin Feige that he would perform sexual favors as long as he got Daredevil in the She-Hulk show. And showrunner Jessica Cow said, time to collect. And retweeted to the tweet.
That is fucking awesome. Jesus. Oh, my God.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this since they first announced it. I mean, we speculated it. We saw him in the trailer, and they've been hinting at it in a couple episodes. Every week since episode 5, we thought the next episode was going to be it, and this time we finally get it.
And were you happy with Daredevil in this show?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people are like, it's not the Daredevil from Netflix. It's not the same one. It's not serious enough, and he's too goofy. And I think the character can be both things. I think it's totally fine. It's I had no issue with it at all. I liked it. We got a hallway fight. That's really what I wanted to see.
Yes, we sure did. You said that he could be goofy and he could be grim and dark or whatever. Here's the thing, right? Is that it almost feels like Daredevil is the Marvel character that like their main writers like to cut their teeth on. That like everyone loves to get a shot at Daredevil, and Daredevil has some of the best runs by some of the best writers ever. You know, I love Daredevil, and the thing is, maybe my favorite Daredevil run ever is by Mark Waid, where after like horrible stuff after horrible stuff for like over a decade has happened to Matt Murdock. He's portrayed as this sort of like fun, silly Daredevil. And it's just that he's that same Daredevil where all this horrible stuff has happened. It's just that he's decided it's like, I have to be positive, otherwise I'm going to lose my mind. And so you can absolutely do a fun, smiling Daredevil. Like, I hate that shit where fanboys get all worked up and they're like, this guy's serious. He should be killing people. It should be like, who gives a fuck? It's not fun. You know, I'll take this Daredevil all the time over that grim and gritty shit.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I really did enjoy the 2 seasons I watched the Netflix Daredevil. I'm not gonna dismiss that because I do really enjoy it, and I really should go back and watch the 3rd season. But yeah, I'm happy to take both versions here.
Right. Exactly. And there's runs like, because that's the Mark Waid run, and then Bendis did this amazing run. That's what got me into the character. And like, just horrible things kept happening to Matt. And I think Ed Brubaker took over and horrible things kept happening to Matt. And like, I think Chip Zdarsky is the most recent Daredevil writer. I'm not sure if he's still on it, but like, he kind of did like a sort of like mid-ground, but kind of maybe leaning more towards that gritty thing. I am sure that when he becomes an MCU show, it's going to be grim and dark and stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, with this though, I was really happy to see Matt and She-Hulk get it on.
Yeah, of course. It fits so perfectly. The Walk of Shame was funny. Although logistically, I'm like, how does no one like gonna just follow him or something like that, you know?
Right. That was one of the funniest moments. And I was gonna say though that I really like that they got it on, but especially because she wasn't She-Hulk when they did it. She was Jen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, it was great because it was a win for Jen. You know, and I think the two of them had fantastic chemistry.
Yes, I agree.
They were, and I do hope in some way we get to see more of that, but I'm assuming we won't.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say I thought the two of them had fantastic sex, and I was like, well, all right, probably. But it's funny because, like, you know, I saw some tweets about Matt Murdock and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, he has to have sex with She-Hulk, right? And the thing is, Matt Murdock is like Hawkeye, and both of them are like Nightwing in the DC universe, where it's like there are these male characters that just basically like sleep around and just get with all these other female characters. And there's female versions of them too that get around too. And I think actually She-Hulk is one of those characters that has got with. But it's good. You know, I liked it. I think that the reason why this episode clicked so much for me is because Matt Murdock was a regular person. Even though he's a superhero, he wasn't this over-the-top caricature like almost every other character in this show.
Yeah.
And so it was just great to see the two of them interact, and then to see them interact with the over-the-top caricatures like Leapfrog and stuff. But the two of them had this natural chemistry, like you said.
Yeah. And, you know, it was great that we got to see both sides, too. We got to see them face off in the courtroom first. And then, you know, She-Hulk gets sabotaged by her own clients yet again.
Yeah. But, like, there was actual conflict for Jen, too, right? Because the guy that made her costume, Luke Jacobson, he's the one that was getting sued. And so her law firm wanted her to go after him. And so it was like, it actually had stakes for Jen, you know?
Yeah. It did, yeah. And, you know, and I like how they brought up the conflict of interest again, because they said that her first case was a conflict of interest, and she gladly signed the waiver for it because she had an idea how to win the case. But this time, because it was a personal conflict, a little more personal, I think, you know, she didn't want to, but she had to.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the show is like ramping up because like that's more compelling. And then like last week, that conflict, you know, she had that conflict with Blonsky in the first or the second episode, or maybe it was even the third. But like she had that other conflict with Emil Blonsky, and like they were able to make the whole Abomination Emil Blonsky thing even stronger last week when she went to his farm, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like the show's kind of ramping up towards the end. It's like getting better as it's going to the finale. And I have high hopes that the finale might actually be really good.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I really liked that there was kind of like a transition in the episode where it seemed like it was wrapping up, and then they fourth wall break. Hey, isn't this wrapping up? Wait, why aren't we wrapping up? Wait, set piece? What's going to happen? And we should talk about what did happen, was something that we speculated early on that we wanted to see. That, the whole time Jen was saying like, oh, I have control of this. I have control of being She-Hulk. I'm not going to turn into this rage monster, and nothing's going to happen. And that's exactly what happened here, which I think is interesting. And it's, a good conflict for the character to have.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because like the whole show, for the most part, since that first episode, Jen has just been like cool and collected and making jokes and stuff. And then finally she flips out when the intelligentsia tries to shame her. I was a little confused with that shaming, actually. Like, who was the man that she was having sex with? Was it that guy?
Yeah, it was Josh. Yeah.
Okay. Right. And so you're convinced that he is part of the intelligentsia.
Well, either that or just hired by them to do that. So
yeah.
It's interesting though, is that what they did was essentially something that happens to people, I guess, like they take their personal information and they plaster it out. They hack people and they do it to ruin people's lives and careers and all this. And, it's that element of realism was not lost on me, that people go through that.
Oh,
maybe not. It's not as dramatic in a public setting like that when it happens, but it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a really disturbing sequence, actually, honestly, when I was watching that and they were showing that on the screen and her family's there in the audience, too. I understood why she was so angry.
Because it's not even like nothing she did was bad. It's just kind of airing her private life out to the world, and people are judging her for it.
Yeah.
Which was, like I said, something that happens to people in real life.
Yeah. I think that if the show continues on this path and then the ending is really good, which is next week, I think that I'm going to rank this higher than I originally thought I would.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. Like, I haven't really thought about it, but I do have my list open there, and I'm looking, and I'm kind of thinking where it's going to land. And I have a feeling it's probably going to stay there, but we'll talk about that next week.
Okay. Yeah. I love doing my rankings with you. So then, was there anything else you want to say about She-Hulk?
No, I think that's it.
Oh man, that was some great conversing. This is a good episode. This is nice and tight. Yeah. Yes, we're gonna get this shit up live because I think that having Comic-Con out there really helps bring people in.
Hopefully,
and if you guys have been just joining us for the first time, please make sure that you guys subscribe to. Brian and I discuss all your favorite adaptations of comics, whether it's in a streaming show or a movie. We're going to be covering Black Adam soon, and we always cover the MCU shows and the Star Wars shows too. Speaking of Star Wars shows, we have episode 5 of Andor, The Axe Forgets. Have you ever heard that expression before?
I have not, but I like it. And I especially like when they explained it. I think it was Skeen. Is it Skeen?
Skeen. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually make a point to leave the closed captioning on for these shows.
Yeah.
Just so I can learn the names better.
Yes. Sherry, my wife, has a thing for that guy that plays Skeen. He was on the show Girls that Sherry liked a lot. And then he also was on the show called The Bear, which was sort of real big this year. And,
yeah, I've seen previews for it in Hulu, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah. So I was glad that they featured him more because it's like, oh, this guy's sort of on the rise right now, this actor. But he's the one that says that line. That line was written by Dan Gilroy, who is the brother of the showrunner. We mentioned him in our notes last week. He, I thought, did a fantastic job that last episode. This episode is good. However, nothing really pops out and like jumps out at you, right? It's sort of like a transition episode. Like you're kind of building up to
completely a setup episode for the heist that's going to happen next week.
Right.
What I find to be very curious about this show is, we said that 2 weeks ago, or last week, I guess. It seemed like they just threw a whole bunch of new characters at us, but they still are kind of lingering on some characters. Like we had a bunch of scenes with Karn, and he's just like going back to his mom's house, and his mom's just like berating him about like, oh, you got to get a job, you got to do something with your life, and like this is like weird. I mean, I imagine that it's just really filling in gaps until they can have this character re-enter the story in a more prominent way. But it's a little jarring, I think. And I felt similarly about the Mon Mothma scenes, Although I feel like that's a little bit more pertinent because it's semi-related to the heist because it's they're both on the side of the rebellion, and with her connection to Luthen, and I mean his there's a scene where he shows his anxiety about the whole job too. Like that makes sense to show to me, but like it's a little strange that they're just showing him, just eating cereal at his mom's with blue milk.
And he was like George Costanza from Seinfeld, right?
Yes,
the mom.
yes.
Yeah,
Space
yeah,
George.
yeah.
His name is Space George now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. I think that they must have gone up to the other Gilroy, whatever the other fucking brother's name is, and asked him if he wanted to make a Disney Plus show, and he probably laid out what it might look like. And I think this is very different from what we normally expect from Star Wars in general, but also especially Star Wars, these shows that have been on now. And yeah, I think that there's many, many people that would sit there and say like, oh, this scene with the mom, like what the fuck am I watching? Why am I watching this? I want to go watch The Mandalorian. But it's just they're making a different kind of creature here. It's like something different. And I think that in the end, this is going to be much more memorable. Because I think that, like, with him, the reason why they would even have a scene like that, I think, is to just, like, slowly make him become, like, Andor's arch nemesis.
Yeah.
And I think what is already happening right now, like, because I don't know if I've ever discussed this with you, but I actually don't really like Rogue One that much. The Darth Vader scene is, like, fucking incredible. And then, like, visually, it might be, like, the best of the new Star Wars movies ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually kind of I'm not invested in the characters on the team. Like, Andor himself is pretty interesting, but I don't really care about the rest of the team. I just wasn't as big a fan of it. But now I feel like I'm already thinking about the Rogue One movie, and I'm like, oh man, he's on the beach and he gets blown up. That sucks. And I like him so much more because of this show. What?
Yeah, no, I will completely agree that I do like him a lot more on the from watching this so far than I did when watching Rogue One. I did really like Rogue One. I definitely could see some of the elements I didn't like. Like I didn't necessarily care about every character,
right?
But I did like the main ones for the most part, especially K2SO.
Right, right.
And I do want to rewatch that at some point before this season ends, just to get some more context again, or maybe after. I'm not really sure.
Right. Star Wars clearly has like eras, right? There's this New Republic era, which is like where the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett take place. There's the old trilogy era. And I mean, they even have names, right? The Empire era is like the old trilogy era. There's the Fall of the Republic, which is like the prequels. There's the High Republic, which are these books and stuff that I'm actually like reading and listening to right now. And this era is part of that Empire era, and it has like Rebels and it's like just right before Luke and stuff, right? And I think that you can really mine this era, but especially if you keep it away from like Darth Vader and stuff,
Yeah.
And I think that like what's so good about this show is they start to like work in like adult real things to think about. Like you have this one character, I didn't write down his fucking name, but like the kid who's writing a manifesto. Did you write down his name by chance or remember it?
I did not, but this is the line I mentioned earlier that I'm like, I don't remember what you're talking about.
Right. So it's so funny because you and I just keep mentioning Twitter, but it's like, I guess that's where I spend a lot of my fucking time. But like multiple people mention this line. He says this line of that it's easy to like, you're bewildered by atrocities. There's so many frequent atrocities so that it's easier to get kind of desensitized to it versus if there was just one atrocity. Right. And I think that
I remember now.
Yeah. And he's saying that that's how the Empire operates. It's like they bombard you with multiple horrible things. So you just become desensitized to it. And I was like, holy shit, is that a metaphor for our life that we live now?
Yep.
Like you go on Twitter for like 5 minutes and it's like, oh, here's the apocalypse in this way and this way and this way. Like, oh, okay, cool. I'm used to it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely takes some truth into reality from there.
Yeah, and like when you look at the rest of Star Wars content, I can't speak for the Clone Wars show or Rebels and stuff like that, but I can speak for the movies. There really isn't that level of sophistication to it.
Yeah.
You know? And like there's other stuff too. Like for instance, the one guy Gorn, who's the Imperial officer that's working with the Rebel team, like he fell in love with a woman on this planet Aldhani, and you could see that he has this feeling for the people of Aldhani, and he's trying to like subtly help them, and little shit like that. That's just not in Star Wars at all. Like this is a much more mature thing.
Yeah, because you're used to seeing stormtroopers who are just these blind, army recruits, that do whatever they're told. I mean, and to a degree where they're almost comical, honestly.
Of course.
I'm kind of hoping we don't even see any in this show at all.
Yeah.
Because I kind of like to seeing the Imperials as more typical officers with uniforms and privates and whatever, lower ranked military instead of just grunts.
Right.
And then, they even have a certain humanity to them, like they're talking about, this isn't one of the best posts to have, but like when you get posted here, you want to see this meteor shower thing, and we can't work now. We got to see it. It was an interesting choice to kind of humanize them as these people who were also just trying to live their lives, but this happened to be working for this horrible empire.
Right. And I love that shit like that. I eat that kind of shit up. I think it's so good. It makes it so much more complex, and it makes you actually appreciate the other stuff, the old trilogy, the prequels, and everything. One other thing that kind of ties in with what you're talking about is there's TIE fighters in this episode and the other episode. But when a TIE fighter shows up, it's fucking terrifying.
Yes, when they were like, hide the gun, like I'm like, holy shit, they made a single TIE fighter fucking terrifying.
Right. And I don't want to claim credit for making that point. That's actually from Star Wars Explained. I took that point from him, but it's a very, very good point.
Yeah, no, I absolutely had that feeling because, like, I mean, we've all played Star Wars video games where you're flying around in an X-Wing and you just shoot one shot and it blows up like 3 TIE fighters. They don't have shields or anything like that. They're just ships. That's the whole thing with the Empire. They don't give a shit about their people. They're just like, here's some things with some weapons on it. We don't care if you get hit. You get hit, you're gonna fucking die.
Right.
Your life is meaningless to us, but here it's like, well, this is a fucking TIE fighter.
Yeah.
What's up?
Right. It's so good, and honestly, it makes me really wish that they had made that Rogue Squadron movie, because I would love to have that kind of feeling of like you're in the cockpit and you're scared of them, and like really give us that feeling too. I love that. Because Star Wars is always so much about like the Jedi and the Force, and then even with like the Mandalorian, it's like they're sort of like super soldiers or they're elevated. It's this ground level stuff is so good.
Yeah, and honestly, like I think my honest to God entry to Star Wars was actually it was 2 things. My entries to Star Wars was really Spaceballs first and foremost. Not lying at all. I saw Spaceballs first before anything. And even though I had toys and I had like I still have my Return of the Jedi sheets. I don't know how I had them. I don't think I saw it in the theater. I was
Yeah.
But my adult Star Wars fan was based on Spaceballs and then actually the ships.
Yes.
I think that Star Wars has the best ships in sci-fi, hands down.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The fighters, the destroyers, absolutely, yeah. For people that are keeping track at home, and I know that people are updating the Brian and Pete wiki, for the Comic Books Transformed wiki that we have. Just if you want to know my entry to Star Wars too, it is just like that. It's Return of the Jedi as well, and I just would like rewatch the end of Return of the Jedi over and over and over again. Like the whole space battle and Vader versus Luke, I just would watch that when I'd come home from school. And I think that that's like probably the main part of Star Wars is that, like that's sort of like the turning to the dark side. That's the stuff I love the most is like when a good guy is like almost turning to the dark side. Yeah. But over the years, since there's so much fucking Star Wars content, it's like, well, yeah, give us more of this ground level stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, speaking of like Jedi and then stuff that's not ground level at all, Skeen eventually finds out that Andor is a mercenary. And the way that he reveals it is he finds that crystal that Luthen gave Andor. And I don't know, no one's mentioned this, so I'm probably wrong. But he goes like, it's a Kyber crystal. And at first I thought like kyber crystals are like what they use to power their ships and stuff, but that's not true at all. The kyber crystals are the Jedi, the lightsaber, like
Yes.
the thing that makes the blade, right? So I think it was purple, wasn't it?
It was purple, yeah.
So do you think I'm weird in thinking like, what if that's like Mace Windu's kyber crystal?
That's interesting. That's an interesting theory. I don't know. I don't think kyber crystals were exclusively used for lightsabers. They might be used for other things, and they might have been mined in general. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I always know that purple is obviously not a traditional color, and they've even made that into like lore that you don't see purple very often. It's kind of rare. So, yeah, maybe you're onto something there. I also thought it was very funny that Luthen, the last episode, mentions don't take less than 50,000 for it.
Right.
And Skeen's like, well, this thing's worth like 30,000.
Right. I did like that too. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think we kind of covered everything. We did talk about Mon Mothma a little bit. Obviously, it's like the same thing as Karn or that officer. What do you know that Karn's first name?
Cyril.
Cyril, yeah. Sometimes I see people refer to him as Cyril. Sometimes see him refer to as Karn. But like, it's like the same thing where it's like a slow burn. Like, obviously, Mon Mothma is building up to being the leader of the rebellion, and we met her daughter this time around, and we're just seeing that conflict at home. And it's like she kind of can't. And this is another note taken from Star Wars Explained, where she kind of can't even control her own family, and she's going to eventually control the rebellion. You know?
Yeah, I do find that to be interesting. I mean, I think her husband's kind of a douche.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering if she just like straight up leaves her family and then they're on opposite sides, you know, when she joins the rebellion fully.
Yeah, and that'll be super juicy. There was one last thing I wanted to bring up too, which was that we also saw the Imperial female officer and her. I think I was calling her Deirdre last time, but I think her name is Dedra.
Yeah, I think it's Dedra. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dedra. What was cool about this episode was that they kind of name dropped planets from other Star Wars movies and stuff. Like they mentioned Jakku. They mentioned They mentioned like the system that the Republic is eventually in The Force Awakens, that the First Order like blows up. They mentioned that system. That I forgot the name.
Yeah, I don't remember. I do know what you're talking about, but I don't remember what the exact word is.
Right, because in the sequel trilogy, it's not like Coruscant. That's not where the Republic is. It's like another system.
Yeah, no, because that's where the Empire was.
Right. So. I think it's like Hetzal Prime or something. I might be wrong. But it was cool because in that scene, she's mentioning all these different like times where things were stolen. And it's kind of showing that like, they mentioned Kessel too.
Kessel, yeah.
And see that I think that's kind of a reference to Solo because of the Kessel Run. And then Infest Ness or whatever, that character from Solo. That's one of the first like factions of the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah.
So I mean that's what's interesting about this time period too, is that it's before the Alliance is formed, and it's just all these little groups, and then they all come together to become the Rebel Alliance. You know,
and maybe that's kind of where this show ends.
Exactly, and that'll be very, very satisfying. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, I'm very, very satisfied too. That's something that my wife doesn't say to me very often. But I actually made that up, but I just thought it'd be funny to like a Rodney Dangerfield or something. Anyway, sorry guys. Anyway, that's my weird way of saying we're done for today. Brian and I usually once a week cover the Disney Plus shows and anything else. We're going to be covering Black Adam in 2 weeks, but next week we have the She-Hulk finale and Andor, right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, guys, make sure you let us know how you feel about She-Hulk and Andor as well tonight. But otherwise, Brian and I will see you guys in 1 week.